When you relinquish control and get out of the way of the business, you'll probably be surprised how much it will grow. Sometimes you're your own worst enemy in a business. If you leave someone who is specialist in marketing to do the marketing, you'll be amazed at how good they could be and how much it could grow.
Welcome to the Career Relaunch podcast, focused on helping you reinvent your career. My name is Joseph Liu, and I'm here to help you gain the clarity, confidence, and courage to manage the ups and downs of making a career change so you can do more meaningful work and enjoy your professional life. In each episode, I feature people who have stepped off the beaten path to reinvent their careers. We talk through their unique personal journeys, the challenges they overcame, and the lessons they learned along the way to help you understand what it takes to relaunch your own career. Today, my guest is going to describe going from designer to founder to eventually straddling being an employee and business owner at the same time. We'll discuss the realities of starting your own brand, when to loosen your grip on something you created, and what it's like to return to full-time employment after running your own company. Afterwards, during today's Mental Fuel, I'll discuss why you may want to rethink your current work arrangements. Have you ever thought about changing your work setup? Maybe you're someone who has a long commute that's wearing you out, or you're required to be in the office every single day, making it hard for you to see your family as much as you'd like. Or you're running a business that's become too all-consuming. At some point in your career, you may face a moment of reckoning when you realize you can't continue to sustain your current professional situation or remain afloat amid the demands your career is placing on you. And something's got to give. But how do you make the choice of whether to hang on to honor the investments you've made or let go to make room for something else? Today, I'm speaking with Matt Oliver, a design strategist with a background in product design who's had to wrestle with this question himself. Matt's career spans both consultancy and entrepreneurship. He started out designing in-house before moving to a design consultancy, working with global brands like Zenith and Tag Heuer. He later founded Oliver Co., a sustainable accessories brand that became B Corp certified, won international awards, and partnered with Virgin Atlantic. His experience has given him a strong blend of creative thinking and commercial awareness, and today, Matt helps businesses use design as a tool for innovation and growth. Now, I first connected with Matt when I was looking for a wallet that was not made from animal hide for one of my friends who's vegan. I stumbled upon Oliver Co. because they make their wallets from apple skins that would otherwise have been wasted during apple harvesting, and I've since bought multiple Oliver Co. products for myself and friends over the years, and I consider his brand to be a good example of a company that's taken an innovative, meaningful approach to manufacturing consumer products. I hope you enjoy hearing about Matt's journey to create Oliver Co. and the tough decisions he's had to make along the way of his own career journey. You can get all the show notes from today's conversation at careerrelaunch.net/107. Matt spoke with me from London, England. Okay, Matt. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to join me here on the Career Relaunch podcast. It is great to have you on the show.
Great to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
All right. So we're going to talk about a lot of different things today. The steps you took to launch Oliver Co., some of the challenges you've faced along the way, and also why you've recently decided to return to full-time employment. But before we get to all that, could you just kick us off by telling me a little bit about what you've been focused on in your professional and personal life lately?
My current role is at a company called Native Design. So we're a design and innovation consultancy doing physical industrial design and engineering. So the physical design of products and also digital design as well. So that's things like user experience and user interface, software development. My title is design strategy manager. So really what I'm doing is I'm connecting potential clients with the different disciplines here at Native. So kind of understanding their challenges and then connecting them with the different capabilities that we have here to try and solve those challenges. So that's what I'm doing on my day-to-day here. So a lot of outreach, I guess quite similar to a business development role, a lot of outreach, a lot of networking, a lot of going to events. Very interesting because I'm working across various different sectors. So one minute I could be in the life science sector. So we do a lot in genome sequencing and that kind of thing. And then the next minute I'll be at an automotive conference. So very different worlds. In my personal life, much more stable in that I've moved out of London, moved to a place called Guildford, which is about an hour west of London, bought a house, got a dog, married, kid on the
Okay.
way.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's in November. Lots going on. Very interesting time.
Sounds like you've got a lot going on personally, and things are going to change radically for you later this year. And so I do want to talk about your career in design. And I'd say that you're probably a less typical guest than the ones we typically have on the show, because a lot of times we've got people here, Matt, who have kind of shifted out of one industry into another industry. I mean, in your case, you've spent, I guess, a good chunk of your career in some regard always involved with design. Now, I know you haven't always been at Native Design. I was hoping we could start by going all the way back in time. And first of all, just revisiting how you got interested in design in the first place at the very start of your career. And then we can move forward from there.
In primary school, genuinely,
Oh, wow.
There was a project, probably, I think I must have been about 9. And it was to design the front of a cereal packet. I was the kid that would always read the cereal packets in the morning. I just was fascinated by the design and what was going on with those. I guess I wouldn't have known I was fascinated with the design. I was just intrigued with all the characters. And so when this project came along, I loved it, and I got really involved with it. And I remember showing my parents, and my dad said, "Oh, you should be a graphic designer." And he said, "Oh, our family friend, he's in graphic design. You should speak to him." But I was only 9. And I saw the work that he was doing, and I found that really interesting, even at that age. And so from that point on, I kind of had it in my head. I was like, well, I'm going to be a designer. And really, I didn't deviate at all the way through secondary school. I did design technology, absolutely loved it. Yeah, all the way through to then sixth form, where then I was deciding what career I wanted to go into. I guess I slightly deviated in that my school was pushing me more towards a more academic job. So it ended up being naval architecture, actually, was what they suggested I did. I was doing physics and maths, and they said, "Oh, you should be doing that." I think they were not pushing us towards design and creative industries as a school, which is a shame, really, but they were quite academic focused. Kind of just before we were starting to look at universities, I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to go into design. I then studied product design at Loughborough, which is kind of a blend of industrial design with the more kind of engineering side. And that's how I got into it.
This might sound like a strange question, Matt, but it sounds like you were always really interested in design. Did you feel like you were good at design? Like, did you feel like you had some potential to be a good designer? Or was that not really part of the thought process? Or did that not feed into your decision to continue to pursue it?
Within my school, and bear in mind it's quite a small school, I felt like I was top of the class for design then. Obviously, then when you go to university, it's a bit of a wake-up call as to whether or not I am a good designer or not. There were some incredibly talented designers there. And I think I probably went into the university more confident. I think probably from the fact that I knew from a very young age I wanted to do it. And I thought I'd be more ahead than I was, and learn what real design was. And I was good at sketching and the sort of artistic side of it. But actually what design is, the more kind of problem solving side of it, I perhaps wasn't as strong. I guess I was always confident until I got to university, then realized, oh, okay, I'm not quite as good as I thought I was.
I think that happens to all of us. It's sort of like you go from a big fish in a small pond, and then you realize the world is a very, very large ocean. It's quite a humbling experience to go to college or university, and you start to see all the talent out there. So what was your first role in design, and how did you get involved professionally in the world of design? I recall that your dad was a business owner. Did that have any influence on the direction you took?
Yes. So I didn't go down the naval architecture route, but the reason naval architecture was on the agenda at the time when I was looking at universities is that my family are from that world. So my dad he did interior fit out of cruise ships. That was his business. Born in Southampton, very naval part of the world, grown up around ships and boats. And I thought I was going to be heading into, and even as a designer, I thought maybe I could go into exterior boat design. not quite to the extent of a naval architect, but exterior boat design. And that's so even at university, I was thinking that's somewhere I could go. I worked at a company called Sunseeker during my placement year. And in a way, I realized then that maybe it wasn't the world I wanted to get into, and actually more kind of product design, as we know it, more sort of consumer products was perhaps more suitable to where my skill sets were. And it was a recruiter that told me that. And that kind of led me to my first job, which was in watch design.
I know you would go to Larson Jennings, which is a well-known watch brand, and I would be interested to hear how you made that pivot from focusing on, I guess, boat design at Sunseeker to then working for a watch brand. Because this is something that comes up with a lot of people is, I like what I'm doing, I might be in the wrong industry, I want to switch industries. So I'd be curious how you made that pivot.
I guess it didn't feel like much of a pivot in that everything we had learned at university was much better suited to Larson Jennings and the work that they were doing. The course and what I studied for 4 years wasn't actually really that suited to boat design at all. It made a lot more sense at Larson Jennings. It was a lot easier. Had I gone into boat design, I probably would have struggled, to be honest.
So you just applied directly to the company and landed the role?
It wasn't direct, it was through the recruiter. I loved watches. I loved Larson Jennings watches, but I didn't think I could design them. I thought that was a different world altogether. And I hadn't realized that actually a lot of what I'd learned at university was very applicable. So all happened quite fast, actually, and got the job. And they were taking a bit of a risk. They kind of saw me as an opportunity to nurture into a watch designer, and actually sent me out to Hong Kong within my first 2 weeks of being in the company to basically learn what they were doing and then be able to apply that.
That sounds really cool to me, to be able to be working for a watch brand. I love watches myself, and I think that sounds like a dream job in many ways to me. How did that go for you? Were you thinking, okay, I'm set, I'm going to focus on watch design, this is aligned with what I studied in university, I'm heading down the correct road? Were you seeing that this was going to be the path you were going to be on for a while at that moment in time, if you can kind of remember back to that moment?
When I joined them, they were still very much a startup, but an exciting startup that was growing fast. Lots of young people in there, vibrant office in London, young founder. Yeah, just had this feeling that we were going to take over the world. That's actually what we said. We're going to take over the world one watch at a time. And I actually loved the whole machine of what we're building, the content, the social, the marketing, the operations, like the whole thing fascinated me. And I was exposed to all of it as well. I was connected to all those teams. And so I was doing just the design, but actually I found I was getting very interested in all the other cogs. Seeing the founder, who was this young guy, I was quite inspired, probably inspired by my dad as well, thinking, well, I could be a business owner. Like, I could do this. You know, how exciting to have a group of people like this that, you know, to build something and put it out there in the world. And the founder, Andy, was getting featured in GQ, and it just, the whole thing was just a great buzz. I became more interested in the business, I guess. I was doing design day to day, but also doing a lot of more kind of product managing factories. So actually not doing that much design towards, as I got more established. The watch market was growing. It was this was before the Apple Watch, or the Apple Watch maybe had just come out. But we kind of were thinking, this isn't going to disrupt things. This is fine. Like this is for a specific tech audience. But the way that it then disrupted the industry within the next 2 years, I realized this probably isn't a industry with much longevity, and therefore I probably don't want to be staying in it for too long.
So what triggered you to start to think about beginning and starting your own brand and business? I know that you started to kind of notice that this could maybe be part of your own lexicon, part of your own ethos to be a business owner, especially because your father was one. Was there a particular event or moment where you started to think, okay, no, this is something I really want to pursue?
So firstly, my interest in sustainability started all the way back when I was on my placement year at Sunseeker. But I saw how boats were built and the huge amount of waste. I mean, it is staggering, the amount of waste that goes into it. And I think that sparked an interest in sustainability. And then I started to try and push a more sustainable agenda at Larson Jennings in the materials that we were using. We had a lot of stock at the time, and they weren't willing to transition to new materials just because the business wasn't in the position to do it. So there was this kind of moment of a few things coming at once, this kind of passion for sustainability, these new materials that were coming on the market, the excitement that I was getting for them. So these were low impact leather alternatives made from fruit waste. They take the fruit waste from industries like the apple industry, where they create the fruit juice and the compote, and they take the waste and they turn it into essentially a leather alternative. And I was so excited by this, and I wanted to bring it into Larsen Jennings. And initially they were like, yeah, as I said, they've got lots of stock, can't do it. And I think seeing the young founder, being inspired by that, it was kind of those combination of things where I found this material. I think I can do it myself because I can see it here. I'm excited by that. I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to do it. I think I can do it. I know about all the different areas. I know how to set up a website now. I know what platform they're using. I know how to do the marketing because I see them doing it every day. Maybe I can do this. And I also knew, because we started to get into small leather goods as a company, and so I was starting to understand things like the minimum order quantities that you had, and they were quite low. So I also was thinking, this won't be too expensive to get into this. It won't be like an upfront cost. So I also thought, if I'm going to start a business, this is quite a good one because, yeah, it's not a massive investment that I have to put forward. So it could be just a side hobby, actually, initially. But realized I had to speak to the owner of the company to greenlight it, which I did. And actually, he was very excited by it and said, no, this is going to be really beneficial for you, probably beneficial for this company as well, for you to kind of see the, all the different things that go into starting a business. You should do it. I just started it very, very small to begin with. It was card holders I'd made first. I had made 30 of them. Yeah, sold those to family and friends and started Instagram and really just built it from there.
You're making this shift now into entrepreneurship at this point, and you start with a few card holders. What sort of product line were you thinking you were going to be focused on at this point? It sounds like you didn't pursue like watch straps at that moment. You decided to go down card holders. How did you land on card holders, and how did that end up expanding into what we now know as Oliver Co?
Couldn't go into watch straps because that was a conflict of interest. Right. That was a bit too far. We had just done a project with small leather goods looking at wallets, card holders. Actually, it was more female orientated for Larsen Jennings. I felt safe designing those because I knew what I was doing. I knew I could create the technical drawings for that myself. And I didn't have any exposure to any other products. So the other reason was I felt like carry goods, more broadly, people were always going to need to carry stuff. No matter what happens, like with technology, people still need to carry stuff. So I also thought there was longevity in the business. The ethos of the company was to be at the forefront of material innovation. And I could see that that was a long roadmap. There was always going to be, you could always make a material more sustainable, lower impact, circular products, and being able to completely recycle them was still a long way into the future. And I thought, well, then if I bake that into the ethos of the company, there's actually lots we could do.
Another question about you just starting up Oliver Co. How are you actually getting this business going? I know a lot of people who maybe listen to this show, they've got ideas, they're thinking about launching a company, maybe they want to start a product line or service. Like, I mean, it sounds like, okay, I want to start this business, but what did you actually do to actually turn this thing into a concrete business? I'd imagine you need to find a supplier, you need to, I guess, find employees. Could you take me through some of those initial steps to make this thing real?
So initially, the focus was on the product, to make those 30 card holders. And actually, the challenge then was getting hold of the material, because it was a brand new material. The company who produced it, who were in Italy, they're very focused on, obviously, large orders. They've just got going. They want to be getting in with the automotive companies and the furniture companies. So they weren't interested in working with a startup at all. And so that was the first challenge, is just getting hold of the material, because the minimum order quantity of it was, I think it was 150 meters, which can make thousands of card holders. So that wouldn't do. So I had to try and get hold of it like a sample piece almost. And I just kept calling this guy. I met him at the show. I had his number. There was 2 materials I was using. And out of a strange coincidence, they were collaborating over a project, these 2 different materials. One was made from wood and the other was made of that apple material. And I just texted him on that day. He said, I'm actually heading there. I've got some samples in the back of the car. I will give them 10 meters of the brown. Will that be okay? And I was like, perfect. That's amazing. Quite lucky in that sense, but that sort of got me going. Made the products, launched a website with the cheapest platform I could find at the time, which was a company called Big Cartel. And really, it was initially just family and friends, just telling people about what I was doing, setting up the Instagram. I guess Instagram pulled in probably the majority of the initial sales. It wasn't like they flew off the shelves. It wasn't that at all. It was probably over a few months. And that's how I initially got started.
We should also probably mention that financially, this is still in a kind of startup early stage phase. You were also working full time, as I understand it, at the time. How did you balance those two worlds? Like working full time at, I understand, a design firm at the time, and also launching your own business.
Yeah, still at Larson Jennings when I first started it. And it was just morning and evenings, really. It was never crazy. I was never like, working till the early hours of the morning. I would be quite structured in the way I did it. I generally get up quite early anyway. So I would normally do maybe a couple of hours in the morning before work. And then in the evening, just really sat in front of the TV doing the work as well. That's really how I got started with it. I think having that prior knowledge of the different areas of the business and having them to lean on as well. Like I'd actually speak to the marketing team or the e-commerce team and say, how do I do this? Like, how do I change the coding of the website to look the way I want it to look? And they would literally on a lunchtime even just say, oh, you just need to do this thing.
What were some of the bigger challenges along the way that you can recall in those earlier days?
The supply chain was the hardest bit. After those 30 wallets, the card holders were made, I needed to work with a factory that had a bit more capacity. The first challenge was finding that factory, and firstly, people taking you seriously because they know the size you are. There's a lot of emailing with no response. And then I messaged so many factories. Really, it was just like, oh my goodness, like someone wants to work with me. Not that, oh, let's test them for quality and see if there's actually a good product. I was thinking about that, but more I was just relieved that someone wanted to work with me. And then when we started producing the product, the biggest challenge was that they're handmade goods. The quality just wasn't there. I wasn't earning loads then. I was putting quite a lot of money, of my own money into it. And so I found it really stressful when production would arrive and there would be faults with 25% of the products that I had. And, thinking that if I bring this up with the factory, I'm such a small, they don't need the hassle, I think. I think they're just going to say, oh, just go away. And I was so fearful of that. I was kind of very reliant on them, but at the same time, I couldn't accept. I did have a high standard of what I thought was good. It was just a real challenge to get them to empathize with my position, try and get them to care more and fix the problems that I had. And it was a lot of back and forth.
How were you finding the entrepreneurial journey as a whole when you compare it to working full-time for an employer that's paying you a steady salary? Like, what was that experience like for you? Did you like that contrast? Were you enjoying it, or were you finding it more stressful than it was worth?
The lows felt low and stressful, but the highs were just awesome. You build this thing and then you get a small win, you get featured in a magazine, you get a customer review. I couldn't compare anything that was happening at work to that feeling of building something and someone saying, I love this, I love what you've done here. And I love that part of having a business and having my own thing. The biggest thing I would compare with it was my own creative outlet where I had full control.
So as those two jobs are running in parallel, so you've got the consultancy that you're working for, you've got Oliver Co. that you are running. How are you thinking about where your career was heading at that moment, and where did you want it to head?
At this point now, I'm pretty set on Oliver Co. being my career. I saw the consultancy role as a really good learning curve for learning very detailed, high quality design. But I definitely saw all the lessons that I was learning there. I was thinking, how am I going to apply this to my own business? The focus then was, how can I start to transition to this being a full-time role? So within about a year of being at the consultancy, I asked my boss whether I could go down to 4 days a week. Because at this point, my own business was growing. I brought in a friend of mine who was in marketing, digital marketing, and he introduced me to ads, running ads through Instagram and Facebook. And that was like an overnight, completely changed the business. It was like
Really?
doubled revenue, practically
Oh,
overnight.
wow. Okay.
And then I really kind of thought, we can scale this now, like create more products, run more ads. If the unit economics work and you're not spending too much on the marketing, your return on investment makes sense, then you can turn up the dial on the ads and you'll sell more product. That's when I then went down to 4 days a week, then quite quickly went down to 3 days a week. Worth saying, I built a base of money. So I was lucky in that I had got money from my grandparents that I kept. I started saving money from my job. It was quite clear I wasn't going to pay myself for a little while. So that was another part of the mindset and strategy, was I need to start saving because I'm going to probably make this jump.
So before we talk about your eventual shift into what you're now doing for native design, can we talk a little bit about those couple years? I'm just looking at the timeline here. Do I have it correct that between around like 2021 to the present day is when you were kind of more fully dedicated to Oliver Co?
There was a period of time where I was very focused.
How long was that for, when you were like 100%? This is all I'm doing, Oliver Co. Is post consultancy.
Yeah. So that was a year and a half.
So a year and a half. What was that year and a half like for you when you were just like 100% all in on Oliver Co?
Incredibly exciting. I had my own space in London, and it was just like my sort of complete outlet of everything I wanted the brand to be in a room. It was, incredibly exciting. And at the same time, a whole new level of stress, knowing that I didn't have any income coming in. And it was almost like a clock of like, you've got a pot, but it's only going to last a year max. You need to grow this business and get this working. And I think there was probably a bit of naivety as to the scale that I needed to get to, what levers I needed to pull in order to grow the business. So there was a lot of trial and error and probably quite frantic. I was very motivated in the office early, and the day would just melt away and never feel like I'm doing quite enough because I guess it wasn't growing fast enough. So as time went on, the stress levels went up more and more. And there's literally an app on your phone that you can see the sales each day. And if I'd had a bad day of sales, it completely affected me outside of work as well. Like I would be miserable to be around. It would be what I was thinking about. Like, what's going on? I'd be checking the website. Is it down? What's going on? And listen, my now wife, she was just beside herself with it. It was carnage thinking back to it before I had the office, and I didn't have the office straight away in Bermondsey. Initially, I had all the stock in the flat that we were living in, and I'd be getting up early and doing all the orders so I could get down to the post office, and the whole room would just go explode with tissue paper everywhere and cardboard, and it was just absolute carnage. Like get there when the post office opens and then rush back, and then I was just at my laptop. And
was it you packing up these?
Yes. And if it was personalization, I'd be embossing it as well with their initials. And I love that about it. I love that I probably am a generalist at heart. I love getting stuck into kind of a bit of everything. That's what I've realized, is that I love learning how to do the website. I love learning how to do the marketing, Instagram. And it was a really frantic time. Just learned so much. But then I guess the reality hit after about a year that I wasn't growing it fast enough.
Is this like a one-man operation at this point? Do you have employees? Do you have freelancers, contractors who are helping you? Or is it literally Matt in your bedroom packing parcels on your own and literally running to the post office?
So I mentioned the marketing manager in the early days, getting me set up on the digital advertising. And then I brought in some freelancers to help me out here and there. But at that point, still like 90% of it was just me doing it all. Then as the business grew, I could start hiring more freelancers.
This is what I hear from entrepreneurs, is at least in the early days when you're doing the vast majority of the work, this thing is yours. Like it feels almost like this is your baby, and you are pouring your blood, sweat, and tears into this thing. And I think you were about to say that things, I guess the business wasn't growing as fast as you would have liked it to grow. I'm always curious, at what point do you decide that something needs to change? You've invested so much into this at this point, and you're not seeing the traction and the growth that you want to see. How did you think through that? Like, how did you think through whether you needed to make a change, not only to the business, but also your involvement with the business?
It was more a financial decision. I was at a stage in my life where I was about to get married. We wanted to buy a house. So it was kind of at this point where, okay, I'm now starting to pay myself, but this is actually really putting the brakes on the company. And I can't see how on earth we're going to grow it if I'm not reinvesting this. But I couldn't just keep going on and on without an income. So if the business wasn't at the size where I could keep it going, but I did take comfort in the fact that it was now at a size where I could go get a full-time role. The business could self-sustain and I could hire freelancers to keep the lights on and keep it going and keep growing it. I think I would have been even really heartbroken if it was like, I need to go get a full-time job and I have to stop the business entirely. I think I really would have struggled with that. I kind of felt like I got the best of both worlds in a way.
Before we get to some of the lessons you've learned along the way, I do have a couple more questions about this transition that you made where you shifted back into full-time work, but at the same time, you were also outsourcing the work at Oliver Co. And I know those two are related, and at the same time, they're two quite big decisions individually also. So just outsourcing versus doing the work yourself. And this is something that I actually really struggle with as somebody who runs my own business, is when to let go and when to hand the keys over to somebody else. I would be really interested to hear, how are you able to just let go of stuff and to hand it over to these other people? I know that's what companies do all the time, and that's what managers do, and people hire people all the time. But when it's your own business and your name is literally, I've got one of your card holders, right? I mean, your name's on this thing. And so I'm just curious how you let go of control.
It was a difficult and also very fast lesson that I had to learn, in that getting my role at Native happened so fast. I expressed an interest with a recruiter. He literally got me the interview within about a week. And then within 2 days, they gave me an offer. And in my mind, this was going to be a lot longer process of finding a job. And it was going to give me time to learn how to relinquish control, understand how to set people up in the way that I want them to. I thought all these things it was just going to happen at a slower pace. But it didn't. The offer was there on the table, and they very kindly said, we want you to start now, but if you need to sort out your business, because amazing that they let me continue with the business. I think a lot of companies would say, no, that's going to be distracting for you. You need to stop it. They again saw it as a positive, having my own business. And they gave me the time. So initially I was doing 3 days a week, and I said, can I do that for a month? So then I had 2 days on Oliver Co just to start to make that transition. Then went to 4, and then went to full-time. That was over a period of 2 months. In that 2 months, I had to learn and hire the right freelancers to relinquish that control. It was stressful initially, that's scary. It was the one thing, I felt very confident running all the different parts of the business. I always felt like I could quickly learn something and do it myself. But the one thing I had never learned was how to manage other people to do this work. And so there was someone that I met who was also a founder of a company, and he had also transitioned into a full-time job, almost exactly the same situation as me. And he said something, he was like, when you relinquish control and get out of the way of the business, you'll probably be surprised how much it will grow. He was like, just get out of the way. Sometimes you're your own worst enemy in a business. And if you leave someone who is specialist in marketing to do the marketing, you'll be amazed at how good they could be and how much it could grow. And that's kind of pretty much exactly how it went. I brought in someone to do the marketing, someone to do the graphic design and customer service, and they were all brilliant at what they did, and the business grew. It did better with me not in the way of it.
how's your return to full-time work been? Because you were working full-time, then you went and did the entrepreneurship full-time, and now you're back into full-time employment. I know Oliver Co. is still out there, which I know is quite different than it not being out there. I've always been really curious what it's like for an entrepreneur to go back and then work for somebody else.
It was difficult in some ways. In other ways, it wasn't, because the role itself was quite self-starting. There was no one else in my role within design strategy / business development. There was no one in the team doing it. So it was very much, I had complete ownership of that. In some ways, it felt like my own little business within the business. Mm-hmm. I guess it would have been quite different had I gone into a role where I had a manager that was very much telling me what to do every single day. It wasn't that. So it was a bit easier. In that year I was running my business, I was in a room majority of the time completely by myself. It was lonely. There were other entrepreneurs in the same block as me, and I'd see them on lunch and we'd catch up. I'm a social person. I love being around people. So I did find it quite challenging not being around people in that year. So being in a company with 80 people, I was immediately energized by that.
Well, the last thing I was hoping to talk with you about before we wrap up, Matt, are just some of the lessons that you've learned along the way of your very interesting career change journey. First of all, what has been the most surprising thing for you about simultaneously running your own business? I know you've relinquished some control of it, but it's still your business, while also being employed. Has there been anything in particular that's been surprising about having those two things running simultaneously?
The surprising thing would be around the balance, having more time for my personal life, even though it was almost like it was going to become more condensed, my life, with having the business and my personal life and Oliver Co. And I thought, how on earth am I going to juggle all of this? And how am I going to be optimum with Oliver Co., still drive it forward and still be good at my work? And I've realized the more I've created the balance between them all and really focused on that, the more energized and focused I've become on each thing. And I've been surprised by that in a way, because I really thought I was never going to get the balance. Yeah, I thought I was going to get pulled in different directions and feel quite stressed in this position. But actually being quite strict in splitting them up and making sure I felt like I was more balanced has really helped.
Do you have any sort of advice that you would give to somebody who's maybe listening to this and they're thinking about launching their own business? This idea of going all in and kind of burning the boats and just focusing 100% on the business versus taking a more, I guess, measured, maybe more diversified approach to your career. Do you have any thoughts on or advice for somebody who's kind of weighing up whether they should just jump in or whether they should kind of dabble at first and kind of dip their toe in?
I personally think dipping your toe in is the best way. Keeping hold of your job as long as you possibly can. Probably learning quite early to outsource what you can. I think, gosh, it's so easy to say with hindsight, but building a business where you thought through the unit economics or whatever service you're going to provide, like, is this actually going to be profitable? Because I think I didn't give enough focus to that. And then if there is a way of going more slowly into it, you'll start to learn the lessons and it will be nowhere near as stressful as just going all in. I wish I kept my hold of my job a little bit longer, because there was that initial financial stress quite quickly. Going all in has its merits as well, depending on the type of business, but it wouldn't be for me.
Final question before we wrap up here. What are one or two things you've learned about yourself as you've gone through all these pivots in your career and had these different formats of working?
Yeah, I guess the thing I touched on before is that I'm energized by people. That was kind of one of the main things. I think the relinquishing of control, and that's something that I'm able to do. I can still be incredibly passionate about something without being in full control of it. And I can apply that to my role now. We're actually expanding the team, and there's other aspects of my role that have now involved other people where I can start, again, relinquishing control, and it's felt easier.
Well, I do want to wrap up with something that I know you're focused on right now, in addition to Oliver Co., which is your work there at Native Design. Can you tell me what you are currently working on doing right now at Native Design, and if anybody wants to learn more about what you do, where they can go?
As I mentioned at the beginning, we're a design and innovation consultancy. We've been going 25 years, a team of 80 in central London. Working across physical, industrial design and engineering and digital design, and working with clients of everything from startups all the way up to your Fortune 500s, designing products and digital experiences for them. It's incredibly diversified, the work we do. We design speakers 1 minute, laptops another, and the interiors of automotive and medical products, and always something different going on in the studio, which I find incredibly exciting, always a different challenge to solve. It's an exciting time now because we're looking to growing into different markets. So trying to move into climate tech. So looking at things like heat pumps, batteries, energy storage, that kind of thing. Growing more in medical technology and the life science industry as well. And everyone's talking about it, AI being the buzzword, but these are transforming these industries, and we are right at the forefront of how to implement this stuff. So it's a really cool time to be in this role in at Native.
Thank you so much for telling us more about your life as a designer, Matt, as a business owner, and the balance that you have managed between full-time employment and entrepreneurship, and as a proud owner myself of an Oliver Co. card holder. I've bought plenty of your wallets and products and gifted them to friends. They're all thrilled with them. So I definitely recommend people check out Oliver Co. If people are interested in learning more about native design or even applying for a role, I hope that they'll reach out to you and check out the company. And so I just wish you the best of luck with both Oliver Co. and your work at Native Design. And thank you so much for coming onto the show.
No, not at all. Thank you so much for having me.
So I hope you enjoyed hearing Matt's perspectives on pacing yourself as you start your next venture, balancing life as an employee and entrepreneur, and outsourcing tasks to open up space for other things in your life. Now it's time to wrap up with today's Mental Fuel, where I'm going to pick up on this topic of stepping away from something important to you. Before we get to today's Mental Fuel, I wanted to thank Hosting.com for supporting this episode of the Career Relaunch podcast. Hosting.com offers web hosting services you need to build a fast and successful website, and it's the web host I've trusted for my own websites for nearly a decade now. I also like many of their green hosting initiatives. For an easy, fast, and affordable way to get your personal website online today, visit careerrelaunch.net/hosting. This is the part of the show called Mental Fuel, where I finish the show with a brief personal story related to one of the topics we covered today and leave you with a simple challenge to help you move forward with your own career goals. So for today's Mental Fuel, I wanted to talk about something Matt and I discussed about loosening your grip on something really important to you. In Matt's case, this was shifting away from focusing all of his time and attention on Oliver Co. For you, maybe it's loosening your grip on something you created, delegating a task you feel is critical to your work, or handing over a project completely that you've invested your blood, sweat, and tears into. I would describe myself as a strong-willed individual, aka stubborn at times. Just ask my wife or daughter or mother or any close friend of mine who's witnessed me not let go of something. And I'd say in the context of my own career, I've generally thought of focus and persistence as positive traits to have. It's what's allowed me to build my own business, to make it as a contributing writer to some publications, to create some useful online content, and also to keep this podcast going. At the same time, persistence has also caused me a lot of heartache, and I'd even go as far as to say suffering in my own career. Whether it was not letting go of the idea of becoming a doctor for a good decade of my life, or working in jobs a little longer than I probably should have, or even getting down into micro-level tasks on projects I wasn't willing to hand over. I think persistence and not letting go has led to a lot of avoidable stress and hours burned in my career and my life. Just to give a small example from one of my own side projects, this podcast is something I've been running since 2016 for 9 years and counting. Now, a podcast is not something that's easy to keep going, especially if it's not the primary focus of your work. Only 25% of podcasts continue past 10 episodes, according to Buzzsprout. 44%, nearly half of podcasts have fewer than 3 episodes. And only 20% continue past the first year, according to Amplify Media. And that number drops to only 7% of podcasts that continue beyond 2 years, according to the podcast host. Now, this is due to a whole range of reasons, including not having enough time, low audience numbers, low motivation, or no clear paths to monetization, which are not limited to the world of podcasting. These are issues with most content creation, whether it's blogging, vlogging, newsletters, webinars, online courses, or even just social media posting. So in the early days, I was probably a little too involved with every aspect of this podcast because I wanted it to succeed and to persist, especially with the content editing. Early on, I would spend hours in audio files, going through and personally deciding what to keep in, what to trim out, even which filler words to cut. And I felt that was important because I had a very particular vision for the show. And while that gave me a lot of control over the content, it also required a lot of time. And pretty quickly, I realized I had to delegate this off. But this is something I should have done way earlier than I did, partly because I just really struggled with the idea of delegating or handing something off to someone else to manage, especially something that was really important to me. And I have more significant examples in my career where I wouldn't let go of the idea of working for a specific brand within a company, or I wouldn't relinquish control of a project, or I insisted on remaining involved in an initiative that I was involved with starting. So on the one hand, the idea of persistence can be a good thing. Persistent people have a lot of grit. They push through when others don't. And their commitment to something makes a real difference. If you watch any of these physical fitness competition shows on Netflix, like Physical 100, which is one of my favorites, one of the first competitions in that show is where all the contestants literally are asked to hang from a bar, and the winner is the one person who can hang on the longest. And while that has a lot to do with physical strength and capability, it also has a lot to do with one's mental strength and persistence. At the same time, just bringing this back to your career, if you want to make a shift, if your career needs to evolve as your own life evolves, you may have to loosen your grip on something to make room for something else. If your work is no longer fulfilling, or you're not growing, or you're not on board with your organization's culture, or your work-life balance is out of whack, or you're just feeling burned out, it might be time to shift something around. I want you to think for a moment about how your career and life look right now. What are you working on? What's been on your mind recently? What are you struggling with? How satisfied are you feeling about the direction of your career? How does your life look outside of work? How's your health, your family life, social life, or personal happiness at this moment? Now, I want you to think about how you would like your career and life to look exactly a year from now. What would you like to be working on? What would you want filling your time at work? And what would you like to be doing and feeling outside of work? At some point, you have to ask yourself where you want your career and life to be and where you want it to head. It can actually be way easier to just maintain the status quo. But if you want to open a new chapter in your career, you may have to make some brave and even uncomfortable actions consistent with that vision of your desired future. This takes me to a quote from Guy Ferdman, co-founder of Satori Prime, and someone who had a huge impact on me during the early days of starting my own business. What are you letting run the show? Is it who you were or who you see yourself becoming? And what are the actions I can take right now that can be consistent with the future I want for myself. So my challenge to you is to decide on one thing you want more of in your career right now. Then identify something you could spend less time on so you could make room for that. Now, I know it's not easy to just drop things from our plate of to-dos, especially at work. But is there a way you could ramp down your involvement, or maybe let go of a bit of control, or maybe delegate the task, or even outsource it? I'm not saying you should necessarily drop something completely, but is there a tactful, realistic way to reduce your involvement or create some other version of this so you can shift your focus to something that matters more to you right now? If you want to share your thoughts on what sort of shift you plan to make in your career, or if you have a question or a story of career change yourself, leave me a voicemail at careerrelaunch.net/107, where you can also find a summary of my discussion with Matt and learn more about him. Again, that's careerrelaunch.net/107. If you enjoyed today's show, I'd really appreciate you leaving me a positive review and rating on Apple Podcasts and or Spotify. And be sure to hit the follow button so you can get the latest episodes of this show delivered right to your device when they come out. Thanks so much for being part of the Career Relaunch community. And a special thanks again to Matt Oliver for sharing his story with us today from London. This episode was mixed by Liam McKenzie. Today's music was curated by Jonathan Rinaldi-Pole. And the Career Relaunch theme song was written and performed by Electrocardiogram. I'm Joseph Liu, and I'll talk to you next time.